Now, there's been plenty of talk recently about the cost of stopping Iran. I think it's time we started talking about the cost of not stopping Iran. As Prime Minister of Israel, I will never let my people live in the shadow of annihilation.
Why does Israel need our help? We need to get out of their way. That's their business, but they should, suffer the consequences. When they bombed the Iraqi missile site, nuclear site back in the 80s, I was one of the few in Congress that said it's none of our business.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 800-876-4123. Bibi Netanyahu, Israeli leader, in Washington for meetings with the president and an appearance at the American-Israeli Political Action Conference Committee. I always say it wrong. But it's the biggest meeting of Jewish leaders in the United States. 13,000 people showed up to hear Obama speak. Pretty much the same number showed up to hear Netanyahu speak last night. And you listen to him, defiant. Sounds like he's not waiting for anybody to decide to do what he's going to do with Iran. Ron Paul in one of the debates, and he said this, they want to bomb Iran? That's their business. That's their business. We have other things to worry about. So I thought it would be important on this Super Tuesday as he's out campaigning. He went up to Alaska. Only candidate to go to Alaska. I like that. Ron Paul from the great state, of course, of Texas joins us again on the Laura Ingraham Show. Congressman Paul, how are you, sir?
Doing fine, thank you. Nice to have you with me today.
It's great to talk to you. And Congressman Paul, you heard, I'm sure, bits and pieces of the Netanyahu speech last night. What's your take?
Well, I have a personal opinion. I think more war is what the world doesn't need. I think the fear of what the Iranians are doing is way overblown, considering the fact that I was very much involved in the military in the 60s, and we had to deal with the Soviets. How could you deal with a more ruthless, powerful nation than ever? But from a political viewpoint, Israel should do what they want to do. They've given way too much of their sovereignty to us. If they want to have a peace treaty, we have to tell them it's okay. If they want to protect their borders, they have to get their approval from us. No matter what they do, it will reflect on us. It's that kind of intervention I think is dangerous. But for us to tell Israel what to do, I don't agree with that.
Well, it indicated last night in this speech, that Americans should know that a nuclear Iran means possibility of suitcase bombs in cities across the globe, including here in the United States, and that given the situation with oil, an Iran that is nuclear can also have a lot more sway in doing what it wants to do to control the markets, including shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. What's your take on that?
Well, I say it's the same stuff we heard before we went into Iraq, and we wanted to go into Iraq for about 5 or 6 years. We waited for the opportunity, and they were able to galvanize public opinion after 9/11, but it was the same thing. Weapons of mass destruction. They can deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States, and it went on and on. Al-Qaeda was there. It was all lies. So that's war propaganda, and I think it's reckless talk, and the people who are anxious to bomb Syria then march on to Iran or to looking at $200 barrel oil and a catastrophic economic event from this. And I don't think it'll serve Israel's best interests. I think they're going to finally galvanize every single moderate Arab nation against them, just as the policy has backfired on Israel already, because they're not better off for us having propped up Mubarak for all those years. Now the Al-Qaeda is in Libya, it's in Egypt, and
weren't we better with
moving?
Right. I don't mean to interrupt, but on the Mubarak front, we could do a whole hour on this, but obviously big problems with Mubarak.
Right,
but
sure.
Nevertheless, Mubarak also allowed Christians to live peacefully in their neighborhoods and their communities. Those Christians are being slaughtered now at the hands of Muslim Brotherhood supporters and Islamists and Jews, by the way, who are just not welcome any longer.
But we supported that overthrow. So that's how foolish our foreign policy is. I mean, we gave support to those who overthrew Mubarak after us propping Mubarak up.
Right. Well, yeah, all my point is that Christians and religious minorities lived a lot more peacefully at night with Mubarak. And Netanyahu Netanyahu, and then we'll move on to domestic policy. Netanyahu said yesterday in the Oval Office, and the president agreed, that basically we're one. We are one on this. We're together. We see this issue the same way. President Obama says, don't worry, we got your back. We're not going to stand by and let the destruction of Israel take place. Where do you think this is going as far as the Obama administration? Is this election year politicking for the Jewish vote, or do they believe they have a common enemy here?
No, I think it's electioneering. I think it's all politics. But I think we should listen to the people who have to do the fighting. And the military officers high up are saying this is the most foolish thing in the world we could do, is engage in bombing Iran. If you talk to the troops on the ground, the ones who support me, more so than all the other candidates put together, I mean, they're the ones who have to fight and die. They're the people who have to do it. This idea, let's just go over and bomb them and invade them and do all this, and somebody else can die for them. I think we should have a joint effort, but it should be more directed to peace than to how do you have perpetual war and thinking that these wars will be of benefit. These last 10 years have not benefited. It has participated in the bankruptcy of this country. $4 trillion additional worth of debt has been added because of these wars. And if you look at Afghanistan, after all those years, it's a country now that has one of the greatest amount of child starvation than any country in the world. That's what we give them. So the success is so bad, and yet nobody wants to talk about change foreign policy. And I think the founders were very clear about the kind of foreign policy we should have. We shouldn't be the policemen of the world, and we shouldn't be a nation building. It's a suicide mission for us as a country.
Well, the good news is that the Al-Qaeda in Iraq is apparently back, and they're in full operation. So we just found that out yesterday.
Right, yeah.
It's a disaster.
Before we went in there, and they're sending Al-Qaeda over into Syria. I mean, the whole thing, this blowback and unintended consequences, they don't pay any attention.
We have to think it through. Yeah, think it through. And Congressman Paul, specifically on what happened, we learned, of course, this always drops late on a Friday, which happened last week. We heard that this joint panel was like a U.S.-Afghan panel that decided to bring about a reprimand against the 5 who were, quote, involved in the inadvertent burning of the Quran, which apparently had all this scroll, kind of kill the Jews, all this extremist stuff on a couple of the copies of the Quran, some of the pages. And now we're going to reprimand the 4 American troops, and there was an Afghan, I guess, also who didn't know what he was doing. And apparently it could involve the diminishment of their rank and a court-martial when the people on the ground, the extremists on the ground, are screaming they wanted them identified and they want them tried under Islamic law. And we have 6 Americans dead and another big suicide bombing there yesterday after the president apologized. What was your take on the apologies and now the reprimand?
Further proof of my confidence in the foreign policy that we have is deeply flawed. We shouldn't be there, and we won't have these arguments over the Quran and other things. It's a war that shouldn't be fought, and you're going to have more of this continuously, and it's going to always be political one-upsmanship and trying to blame one or the other. But I just think that if we don't change the policy, you're going to see a lot more of those kind of arguments.
But you don't think the troops should be reprimanded for something that was an inadvertent deal on their part, do you?
No, if it's inadvertent, but what about when it happened in 2007? Our troops took the Quran, and just to humiliate them, they put the Quran up and used it as target practice, and George Bush thought it was terrible, so he apologized to the Iraqis. So nobody talks about that, don't you think?
I mentioned that on Friday, and the same deal. I mean, he didn't specifically, I guess, come out and speak about it, but others did. Yeah. And it was everyone's prostrating themselves on the issue. Meanwhile, our people are being slaughtered. We're talking to Ron Paul, of course, candidate for the presidency. Romney, and I know you and Mitt Romney talk of your helping him and working to help him, but you've had tough ads on Romney. You had him up in Washington State, but I know you didn't care for this individual mandate issue, but now we find out in this 2009 piece he wrote in USA Today, in an interview on Meet the Press, he specifically did refer to the Massachusetts solution as one that perhaps can work nationally, including the mandate. Right. What is your take on this? When he's been saying consistently that it's not a national deal, this is just a state kind of experiment that he thought was best for his state.
Well, I think it tells you that he's not a free market conservative, and that if conditions are such that you'd wonder if he wouldn't do that nationally again. It really raises a lot of questions because you've been on both sides of so many issues.
Well, we had Joe Scarborough out there today, I guess, and others saying Romney has lied consistently on the campaign trail by saying he was not advocating a national mandate.
Well, I haven't used those words, but certainly the flip-flopping and changing minds, and I see it with all three. If Romney's doing it, do you think that Santorum doesn't do it? I mean, he voted for funds for Planned Parenthood, but conservatives aren't harping on him, and Gingrich has been around all over the place too. So didn't pretty much on those big omnibus spending bills. With these huge monsters that go through Congress, I mean, you can pretty much point to, maybe not you, but almost every conservative. Yeah,
Jim DeMint, they've all voted for this stuff, though. To say he somehow likes Planned Parenthood, he doesn't.
That is the problem with the system. So if you go along with the system and say, it's pork barreling, we got to do it, I got to get my stuff in, I have to vote for the bad stuff. This is what's been going on for 30 or 40 years. That's why we're in this crisis. So they can't get a pass on that. That's not right.
We're talking to Ron Paul, of course, the candidate for the presidency. Where can we see you surprised tonight? What states we should be looking at? I'm going to be at Fox broadcasting on the panel. I'll be with a bunch of folks up in New York. We'll be watching the returns come in. But where should we be looking for the Ron Paul
We've always
surge?
We've always gone to the caucus states, and the three that we're working the hardest now is Alaska and, of course, North Dakota as well as Idaho.
And I understand that Romney has a lot of support in Idaho because there's some Mormon presence there, and he has people on the ground there. What are you seeing when you're talking to your people there? Yeah. And what are you sensing versus Romney and his presence?
Well, I do. The Mormon factor is a big deal, and yet my positions are very much in tune with what Mormons believe in: self-reliance and conservatism and limited federal government. But the Mormon issue is a big issue. I think if Mitt wasn't in this race, I'd probably have about 70% of the vote. I mean, it is very. Our strength is very good, but then the loyalties, come in. It's sort of like John Kennedy. Some people might not have liked his politics, but they were anxious to see the first, first Catholic president. The same way, in the last election, a lot of people, would vote a certain way just because it was great to see, a minority in the White House.
Oh, milestone.
Kind of things.
Yeah, milestone. Well, you can have the first guy who wants to really abolish the Federal Reserve be president. I mean, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Another milestone. All right, one more deal for you because I know you and I agree on this issue, and this is Eric Holder yesterday. We have a very brief amount of time. Eric Holder, Attorney General, testifying on the Obama administration's policy, which allows for the killing of Americans abroad who are found to be imminent dangers to the United States. Let's listen.
The Constitution's guarantee of due process is ironclad, and it is essential. But as a recent court decision makes clear, it does not require judicial approval before the president may use force abroad against a senior operational leader of a foreign terrorist organization, even if that individual happens to be a U.S. citizen.
Congressman?
He's dreaming. And I am so delighted that you're willing to bring that up because some conservatives won't bring it up, and that is a big issue. This whole thing about assassinations and arrests by the U.S. military and no trial, and it never came up in our debates. And if you see the significance of this, is pretty amazing. So I compliment you for bringing it up.
Thank you. Well, in my mind, it might be a Lockie today, but it could be just someone tomorrow who happens to disagree with what the prevailing wisdom is.
Yeah.
What an imminent threat.
What if you go to an anti-war rally? They did a little bit of that in the 60s, and the FBI was doing a lot of things they shouldn't have done against Martin Luther King. And this could come, but it's a lot worse this time because we're facing an economic crisis and a breakdown of our civil liberties here at home, I think is very dangerous.
To me, the orders to kill Americans abroad, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it sticks in my craw. This one I'm not letting go of. You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show.
Great.
Ron Paul, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.